We're beginning with the the really important issue of childcare on this morning's show, because the union representing childcare workers is warning that the sector is at breaking point with a growing staffing crisis and more than 40,000 children now on waiting lists for places. SIPTU says up to €45 million in state funding earmarked for pay increases is at risk as employers continue to engage in negotiations. The union has described the situation as unacceptable, warning that low pay is driving staff out of the sector and that stronger action may be on the horizon if talks don't begin soon. To discuss this, I'm joined by the SIPTU organiser Diane Jackson and Noel Mulderrig, co-owner of the Kidz Haven creche in Shannon. And thank you to both of you for joining me on the show this morning. Diane, the situation, is it unacceptable? If so, what's at the heart of this dispute? Is it simply low pay, or are there other issues, as we have heard in the past in relation to the childcare sector, that are leading to this dispute? Hello, Diane, can you hear us? I think we might have an issue with Diane's line. Noel, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm here this morning, Alan. Good morning, how are you?
Good morning to you. This situation being described by SIPTU as unacceptable, are employers refusing to engage in pay talks? What's your response to that?
Well, my response is to say that employers have been very good in this business in engaging for the last number of years and have honoured every agreement made, all the ERO agreements, which is the pay rates for childcare providers, different sectors, room leaders, managers, etc. We've honoured everything. But we have to be realistic here, Alan. And the last couple of weeks has seen a seismic change in the way the world is running. And it's the perfect storm. There's three issues. There's a global issue. You have a massive war in Iran. You have the closure of the Straits of Hormuz. You have a war in Ukraine that seems to be never ending. You have the national issue where you're going to have huge increase in transport costs, energy costs. And mark my words, that if you watch the way the gas prices are rising, and not alone in with the stuff in Qatar, but there was a massive typhoon in Australia when one of the major gas plants in Perth was knocked out there recently. And that is going to drive prices. And I can assure people listening this morning that the cost of electricity is going to go through the roof this year. And just a quick point to make and to explain why the childcare sector is really hurt is we're taking all these and we haven't got an increase in our fees in a lot of cases since 2017. And that's what's really hurting us at the moment. OK, I think we have Diane Jackson from SIPTU on the line now. Diane, are you with us?
I am indeed.
Brilliant. OK. Diane, Noel has laid out a stall there. There's a number of issues, obviously, current world events, increased electricity costs, and I can imagine in many childcare settings, there'd be one of those where, you know, the heating would have to be on quite a bit, so that's going to be totting up the bills as well. And Noel mentioned no increase in fees for some time. What would you say to all of that?
The situation at the moment, Alan, is that we've been calling on the employer representatives, the Federation of Early Childhood Providers and the IBEC-run Childhood Services Ireland to come to the negotiating table. And the reason is that the sector and SIPTU and our members campaigned and lobbied government for funding to invest ring-fence funding in pay. And we were successful in that the government has put on the table €45 million ring-fence for pay. But that money will only be available to the sector if a pay deal is agreed and signed off. And that's where we're at the moment. That funding is available to the sector to support a pay deal from the 1st of September this year. But we're very conscious that the clock is ticking away and we're now into April, just into April now, and we have a long process ahead of us because we're talking about setting minimum legally binding rates of pay. So we have to go through a process through the Labour Court and it has to eventually be signed off by the Minister. So this is a lengthy process and we're very conscious that we want to get the deal done and get out the other end of the process in time for the 1st of September so that we can ensure that the sector draws down every cent of that badly needed funding. There's a lot of funding needed to invest in the pay and conditions of early years educators and managers. And we have to make sure that we don't lose any funding that's on the table and don't have a situation that we end up sending money back that I think Noel would agree is badly needed in the sector to improve pay.
Yeah, and Noel, I'll just bring you back in on that. I mean, I think a lot of people would accept the various reasons you touched on earlier as to why it's difficult for people like yourself, Kidz Havens and other child care providers to increase pay for staff. But if there's 45 million in state funding earmarked for pay and it's there and it'll be lost if talks don't happen, should the employers groups, representative groups, come to the table and try and hammer out some sort of deal?
Okay, well, the first thing I want to say is excuse me, I do not represent the Federation of Early Childhood Providers.
Of course,
I advocate for child care providers in Clare. I've done so for a number of years, and I try to be a very common sense approach. And the one thing I will say is I recognise the contribution of the childcare workers. I recognise the fact they do a very difficult job, and in principle, I do agree that it's important they're paid the correct rate. And the correct rate is the rate that means they can have a wage that allows them to live comfortably in what is a difficult environment at the moment. But the worry I have, and the worry that employers have at the moment, and I'll give you a very simple example, and mathematics don't lie. In the 26th of February this year, I filled an oil tank for €970. Next week, I'm going to fill my oil tank, and I have to fill my oil tank every 2 to 3 months, depends on the weather. And this has been a shock in winter. So my oil tank to fill this next week will be over €2,000. And last week, for some reason, it spiked at €2,200. Now, that is a cost that I didn't factor in on the 1st of January this year. And the second thing is, for some reason, Clare County Council came along in January and upped commercial rates for every commercial operator in Clare by 8%. That's going to cost me probably €600 or €700 more. The auto-enrolment of pensions came along in January. That cost me €150 a week. We are facing into, let's be honest here, a worldwide recession if the price of oil doesn't stabilise. If kerosene and diesel goes to €3 a litre, we are in serious trouble. And when you have the haulage people on and you're listening to them and they are telling you this message is not just me. So yes, I will go back to the point. I agree in principle with the right rates of pay for employees. I understand the contribution they make. But the fear I have and the fear all employers have this year is that we are in the unknown. And to go back to the first point I made, I haven't got an increase in my fees since 2017. And if you find any industry this morning that hasn't got an increase, and I keep using this example, if I go into the plaza today with my €2 that I paid for a cup of coffee in 2017, I'm now paying €3.40. And basic economics is basic economics. The money has to come in for the money to go out.
Okay.
And there's no point in me saying otherwise.
Okay, Diane, Noel has explained himself pretty well there. I mean, that €45 million in state funding, if the employers' representative groups were to come to the table, some sort of deal is reached, how soon can that money be drawn down and be used for employees' pay? And would that 45 million cover the number of staff who require pay increases to, as Noel says, live comfortably? Or would people like himself, childcare providers, still have to contribute some money towards the required pay increases, which, as Noel has said, there's been so many sudden increases in so many different areas that it might be difficult for them to do so?
So the funding is available from the 1st of September, and for every day and every week that goes by after the 1st of September and a deal is not signed off, that we lose the money. The sector loses that government investment in pay, and that's just a crucial point. And we really feel in SIPTU that we cannot allow that to happen because the funding is so bad.
And that is understandable. Sorry to cut across you, but that, like, to employers like Noel, that's 5 months away, and that's 5 long months of reaching around in your pocket, just not finding more and more money being sucked out and less to be able to give to staff. If that comes in on the 1st of September, would it cover all the required increases for the number of staff who need it, or would employers like Noel still have to add something extra to the pot?
Well, as you said yourself, we have to get around the table and get down to the negotiations, and that's where all of that will be thrashed out. But the problem at the moment is we haven't got to the table, and we haven't managed to bring the employer representatives to the table, and that's the impasse we're at the moment. We haven't even started those talks. But I just want to say, in relation to the educators and managers who work in the sector who we represent, they're also feeling the impact of the cost of living crisis. They're also feeling the impact of the increases in fuel. They have their cars and their homes to run, and it's putting an awful lot of pressure on our members. And the minimum rate of pay that applies for an early years educator is €15 an hour, and that is below the living wage, which at the moment is €15.40, and that calculation was done last July, and it doesn't take into account recent events. So I'm sure if it were to be recalculated, it would be well above $15.40 per hour. But the key point, I think, that everybody needs to, employers and educators are looking at, is the level of the staff turnover in the sector. The most recent figures nationally show a turnover level of 26%. That's a quarter of the staff leaving their jobs. They're leaving the sector, or they're moving from one service to another. But mainly what we're finding, and from our conversations with our members, they're leaving the sector in pursuit of better wages elsewhere, because they simply cannot afford to live on the wages that's in the early years sector. It's a huge problem for educators, but it's a big problem for providers as well, because the sector operates with staff-child ratios, and if they don't have the staff, they cannot open the rooms, and that impacts services in terms of their income, but it also has a huge impact for parents who are scrambling to find a place for their child. And as you probably know, or listeners may know, there's a waiting list of over 40,000 children throughout the country.
I mentioned that at the outset.
Yes,
let me bring Noel back in on that. Noel, those are also very fair points. I mean, I think it's understandable the differing rising costs that you mentioned, childcare providers such as yourself are having to deal with, but even aside the commercial rates increase and so on, those increases in fuel and energy and heating costs and so on is a worldwide phenomenon. As Diana said, it's not just yourselves who are dealing with it, it's the employees as well. And there's a serious number of them leaving the sector because they feel they're insufficiently remunerated. So something has got to give.
Alan, you're correct, and I recognise that everybody's hurting at the moment. But I only speak for myself. And the way I look at it is, and I've talked to you before, and I told you in 2024 we made the decision because of viability issues that we were getting out of this business. We were in it for 24 years. And we decided this was not viable anymore. But the reason we stayed on is because our loyalty towards our parents that we have, who couldn't find alternatives, and our loyalty to our staff, that we have many who are long-term employees and are committed to us and have given us great service. But I understand that everyone is hurting, but my bank balance at the end of the month is not working out. And I don't know, honestly, talking here to you today, where I can get any more increases. If the government decide, for whatever reason, that their childcare policy is to reduce the cost of childcare, and that is respected, they have to properly engage and properly fund us and take the foot off the heads of the providers. Because when I leave this business, and I will leave it within the next 2 to 3 years, there is no one coming in to replace me. There is no bank in Ireland lending money for childcare facilities for a business that is not getting increases. And SIPTU know this, they understand the pressures we're under, and I accept that they represent their members, and I accept their right to represent their members. But we also have to get real. 2026 is going to be a horrendous year for everybody. We have to knuckle down, we have to toughen out, and we have to hope and pray that this war comes to an end and reality returns. Then everybody will sit down again and talk. But until this happens, I have no idea where I'm going to be in 6 months.
And I suppose, Diane, as Noel mentions there, Kidz Haven, in 2 to 3 years, it'll be gone. There's over 40,000 children on waiting lists. There'll be some more added to that list over the coming years, and I suspect Kidz Haven aren't the only business of that nature that will close their doors over the coming short to medium term period, which is going to increase the pressure on parents. And while I'm sure there are many people listening who know we've covered this issue on Morning Focus many times, who have a lot of sympathy for the staff, I'm sure there's an amount of sympathy out there for the providers as well. Shouldn't the government be doing more to help them so that they can, then in turn can help the employees?
Yes, well, I was actually looking at the data in relation to County Clare in terms of the number of services, and what I see is that the number of services in Clare has actually increased from 135 services in 2021-22 to 153 as of 2024-2025. So that's at least good to see that.
That is positive, though you would imagine. We don't know how long events in the Middle East are going to go on for, that are quite recent, and what impact that could have over the coming year or two.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I said earlier on, all these events are having a huge effect on the educators and staff who work in the sector as well. But the other point I just want to make is that the data also showed that 56% of services in County Clare reported staff vacancies, and we know that it takes weeks and weeks to fill those vacancies. And while you have those vacancies, it does impact the services' ability to be able to take in children, because, as I said, they have to operate within staff-child ratios, and that obviously impacts revenue and income for those services as well. So if you have a service that, with a capacity for 100 children, but you can only take in, say, 80 children because you don't have the staff, that impacts your income. And as I said, the pay is the big issue. It's driving staff out of the sector.
And there certainly, Diane, seems to be strong appetite for action amongst your members. Over 2,000 workers signing a petition, and there has been a warning of stronger action. What might that look like if talks don't begin soon?
Well, I think there's a bigger problem for the sector. We know from speaking to providers similar to Noel in the community and in small providers, they want to see this investment in the wages of their staff. They want to give their staff a pay increase this year. They know that there's an expectation of a pay increase, and they want to make sure that they're able to draw down that of support that's available from the government to deliver a pay increase for their staff this year, because retention of staff is critically important in terms of the future viability of all these services. Because if you don't have the staff, you don't have a service. And the concern that we have in SIPTU, and I'm sure lots of employers share this concern, is that if the sector isn't able to deliver a pay increase to the staff, how many more are they going to lose from the sector, where they will go and find work elsewhere? And we hope that the provider representatives will see the logic in coming to the talks and commence those talks very quickly. But it is just really concerning that we're now in the beginning of April and the talks haven't even started.
Happened. Okay, I just very quickly, because I'm almost out of time, Diane.
Okay. Just to say that the talks last year, they actually started in January of last year, but at the end of the day, we went late. The pay deal did not come into effect until the 13th of October. So there was 6 weeks of state funding that was lost to the sector.
Okay,
that was over 4 million, and that really impacted providers, because a lot of decent providers actually paid the higher rates from the 1st of September, but they actually lost out.
And you don't want to see a repeat of that situation. Okay, I've only a few seconds left, Noel, but final word to you on this. I mean, you've well explained how you personally at Kidz Haven are in a bind, but are you hopeful that some sort of resolution can be found with the employers' representative groups, and that as little as possible, hopefully none of that €45 million was lost out on?
Okay, the reality I'm going to say to you is that the cost of increasing pay, €45 million, is not enough. And we have always said this, that if you want a proper childcare service that is properly funded, you must fund it. And it is the problem that we have been knocking on this door. Lift the ban on the freeze of fees. Give us the money to run the service, and we will pay the staff. There is no problem. But non-viable businesses and closed businesses are no good for anybody. And as I said to you so many times, Alan, There is 2 creches here in Shannon. There is 30,000 people come to work in Shannon every day. There is no big operator from Dublin coming down to Shannon opening. And the reason they're not coming down to open, which should be a viable business, is this business is no longer viable, it's no longer profitable, and people are getting out. And people are getting out in their droves. And this will continue until proper funding is made to cover the costs.